gives me great pleasure to welcome onto the stage to talk about some of these themes that I have introduced today my two panelists. We have Mr. Farouk Bastaki and we have Mr. Kamel Al Harami. Please welcome to the stage. Gentlemen, how are you?
Great, thank you very much.
Hopefully I outlined some of the opportunities and the risks that macroeconomics and geopolitics are causing for the global business, the global investment community, but also for those of us living and working in our region. And I suppose we'll start with a big question, and I'll come to you first, Kamel, if I may. That, you know, if you look at the attractiveness of Kuwait's business environment, the investment environment here at the moment, and you consider Kuwait's position both within the region and its opportunities within the global space, what do you think needs to improve, and how can those improvements take place to attract private sector investment and jobs and to get Kuwait on the growth path that we're seeing for other countries of our region and globally?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for having me, for Kamco and for Borgan Bank. Your question is a bit hard one to answer, but however, I have to dwell on what we have as positiveness in Kuwait, whether it is a crude oil of about 90 billion barrels of proven reserve, or about which lasts us for 90 years, if I assume that we consume or we use crude oil of about a billion barrels per day. The other thing that is very positive in Kuwait, and it's a leading industry, is our refineries. I think we have the best top refineries in the world. In Kuwait, we have Azor, we have MENA Abdullah, and we have Shaibe. That can provide globally the best quality of oil, petroleum products. In addition, the strength or the positiveness of Kuwait is that we also have 3 joint venture refineries outside Kuwait. In Oman, in Duqm, just recently opened last week, in Vietnam and in Italy. So we are global in that sense. We are joint ventures. However, what we're lacking is that we do not have enough joint ventures in Kuwait with foreign partners. We had a joint venture established in 93-94 with Dow Chemical, Kuwait. And it's still running, and it's still giving us $1 billion profit every year, net profit. Why are we not expanding on that? Why are we still at our stage? Why are we, when I talked about refineries, we are having the best. But when it comes to petrochemicals, we are very low. We are not there. What is happening? On the other hand, we have the private sector that are willing to invest. But we have also problem. We have domestic problem. I do not see, there is a responsibility from the private sector, and in particular from Chamber of Commerce, to promote the idea of there is nothing wrong with the private sector. There are many companies or countries are investing. We should do that. There are many companies that could be easily privatized. Can you imagine Kuwait Oil Tankers Company are responsible for distributing gas cylinders? I cannot, so why don't we give that or allow that to be privatized? It's a matter of distribution. Today we have 2 gas service stations that are running privately, and they are doing very well. Why don't we expand? Why don't we have a third one? Kuwait National Petroleum Company has nothing to do with distribution. Its function is to run and operate refineries. It's not distributing gasoline. That's not our business. The other thing that there are so many things that we need to improve upon. Here it is, we have the best refinery, Azur, 615,000 barrels per day of refining capacity, but then we have formed a new company for it. Why? Don't we have KMPC that started in 1965 with our first ever refinery built by private sector, 40%? What happened?
So you're articulating the fact then that there are examples. It has been done, it can be done. So I guess the question is, what's preventing it from happening on a larger scale? Where is the lack of appetite? Is it from government? Is it from Parliament? Is it actually from the private sector itself that doesn't really seem to show the willingness to get involved within these important opportunities within the country?
I think from all of us. I think from society, I think from us, I think from the culture, but also there's nobody that is pursuing it. We need, again, I emphasize, we need the private sector, we need the Chamber of Commerce to do something, that there is nothing wrong with the privatization. We had, as you said, we had the experience. We had, in the 60s, Kuwait oil tankers. It was a private petroleum industry. It was a private, totally private. What happened? In 1960s, the private sector invested money, its own money, in building a refinery, 40%. I don't know what's happening. But then we have to be transparent. We have to be open, and every one of us are responsible in order to put ideas forward to the government. So this is what I can say. We have to have a lobby. The private sector must have a lobby in order to achieve what we have in mind. And there is no worry about. And the other thing that the Prime Minister said it last week in his press conference, that the government is unable in the future to recruit 30,000 young Kuwaitis. It is the role of the private sector. And here is what the private sector can do and can add value to it.
Thank you, Kamel. That's a really nice introductory statement. And I'll come to you, Farouk, and ask you, I mean, Kamel there outlined a lot of whys and asked the question about how these changes can come about. And let me pose those difficult questions to you. Why do you think we have these challenges here, and how might we overcome them in respect of getting more private sector involvement in some of these areas that Kamel said, look, these are not things that government should be doing. These are things that naturally should be the preserve of the private sector. Why are we not getting there as quickly as we might like?
Well, first, good morning, and thank you very much for the invitation. I think our problem here in Kuwait is basically the oil. We're talking about oil. If you check the 23-24 budget that it was put out by the government, 88% is either oil or oil-related. You're talking about revenues of 19.5 billion KD versus expenses of 26.3 billion KD. So you have a 6.8 deficit KD. Now, let's look at the expenses. 80% of the expenses, out of the 26.3, we're talking about 21 billion of that is basically salaries and subsidies. So, and that is 21 billion KD, which is you already, before you start, you cannot pay the salaries or the subsidies. Forget about capital expenditure, other expenditure. That's another problem. So you have to solve that. First of all, this the question about the subsidies. You have to rationalize that. It has to go to the right people. If I own like 100 houses or one house, still I'm getting electricity. We're spending like 2.5, 3 billion KD on subsidies on electricity because you're not paying for it, so nobody cares, you just go and spend it. So that has to be rationalized. We talked about privatization. Yes, that's the only way to go, to privatize. And when we talk about privatize, in my view, I'm talking about privatize education, privatize health, privatize everything, oil sector. So it will be, that will be the solution. Because as Mr. Al Harami mentioned that 30,000 are coming to work every year.
And they can't all be employed by the public sector. No.
Well, how? Because now you have like 10 people in a room working for the government, became 50, became 100. A certain, like there is a limit, that's it. And so encouraging privatization, privatize these businesses, and then next step, tax them. Make people partner in these businesses, and they make money. The government can make money by reducing the subsidies and by taxing these businesses. I think that will be an idea to go forward with.
How hard do you think it will be for the government to wean Kuwaitis off the generous salaries and subsidies that they've become used to in order to start this process of normalising the economy? And how might that begin?
That will be very, very difficult. I think that will be $1 million question here. You need a lot of prayer for that to happen. It's, like if you go to any country in the world, who like to pay taxes? Yeah, you go to the US, they are jumping up and down because they want to pay taxes? No. Like you get people free stuff and they get used to it. It will be very, very difficult to get them off. But we have this problem. We've been running budget deficit for the last, 10 years. Maybe you have a 1 year off, you go up a little bit, and then the main theme is deficits. And you were financing this deficit through the general reserve. There was like $150 billion in the general reserve, which been depleted completely. Because of these, you're running 5, 10 billion KD deficit every year, the money is gone. And now, what is the next step? You're going to open the future generation and take from the future generation? Then you have nothing in a few years. So how you're going to do it, it will be difficult. But when you start, you will find out how to do that. But you have to start.
You have to start. Okay, thank you. You talked there about such a large proportion of the government's fiscal contribution coming from oil. I think you mentioned 88%. And clearly, with the conclusion of COP28, a statement that transitioning away from fossil fuels in energy system in a just, orderly and equitable manner is the commitment of all of those signatories. Does that create even more of a burning platform for Kuwait to get on with its diversification program? Do we sense now that this is getting ever more urgent as a priority for both the government and for Kuwaiti society? Kamel, I'll come to you on this as our oil sector expert. Clearly there is plenty of oil. Clearly we're not going to run out of oil here, perhaps before we run out of demand. But the extent to which this now becomes a priority and this diversification journey starts to become even more urgent, do you think that is being felt now? And do you think this will actually stimulate some of the reforms that are required?
I don't know. I don't know, because as a Kuwaiti, and I see that I have about $700 billion in sovereign wealth funds, I cannot see, I disagree, I cannot see that I will tax the people. However, what I want, I have the wealth, and I have the intelligence, and I have the education. What I should do is that pave the way for privatization. I think this is very essential, This is where you can create job. This is where you can diversify. We have done it. We have the history of it. To me, it is not difficult to diversify. I've done it. I can do it. I have the wealth. I have the funds. What I need is only some sort of a culture, a change of culture. That's what I need. And also, bear in mind, we have a small population. So I should not be hurrying up about oil. I have all the tools, all the positive and necessary tools to move forward. However, what I said, what I need is somebody that can collect all the positiveness of Kuwait and put it in a one pot, and then we can move forward.
Who is this person? What is this vision? How can this be communicated and acted upon? It sounds as if we're waiting for something to happen in order for this process to really begin in a meaningful way.
Well, I think the positive point that we heard of last week's the new Prime Minister talking, at least being very open, saying I cannot handle the 30,000. And then it is, and then we should not stop there. I think there is a responsibility from all civil societies that we have in Kuwait, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, whether it's the Graduate Society, whether it's the Media Society or the Press Society, and the private. We have to educate ourselves. We have all the wealth. We have the brains. But then we cannot be status quo. How come we were good in the 60s and we were leaders and we made the first sovereign wealth fund in the world, and then we are static? We have to change, and the change should be combined between the people, the government, the MPs, and some sort of lobby for the business sector.
What caused that lack of momentum? Was there a kind of a complacency that, you know, the oil wealth would last forever? And is that view changing fast enough now?
I don't know, really. To me, whether it is the oil will last us for another 90 years or 45 years, we have many elements. We don't have, we can easily diversify. We can easily go into petrochemical business. How come we are lacking the petrochemical business? How come we don't have foreign partners coming here? I don't understand it. We have now a Durra field. It's an opportunity, a Durra field between Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. Why don't we put a petrochemical plant here? So the opportunities are there, but again, we need somebody to put all these opportunities in one basket and to lead them.
Thank you, Kamel. Farouk, let's talk about the business environment and how attractive it is in your view in Kuwait. And I shared some stats earlier around how we at The Economist measure the attractiveness of business environments in different countries around the world. And these are calculated on a range of different measures. If you would, and many of those actually are very positive for Kuwait. So Kuwait clearly has some strong points, but it also has some areas of relative weakness, perhaps attitudes towards the private sector being one of those, how conducive Kuwait's environment is for foreign direct investment. What needs to improve? If you look at all of those measures, what would you prioritize for improvement in order to make Kuwait more attractive for private sector investment and, importantly, jobs?
Well, just a comment on COP28. The official position of Kuwait was they rejected phasing out fossil fuel, which is understandable, you're dependent on it completely. And they were talking about more, control the emission instead of that.
But is that fighting a losing battle in terms of global opinion?
Definitely, because if you're going to be dependent on the fossil fuel, sure, then I don't know why they signed the agreement anyway. It doesn't make sense. The problem about you talking about making Kuwait a better, attractive, or it being more attractive for businesses, where are the businesses? You have to create a private sector before you invite people to come and participate in that private sector. I mean, now it's like everything is controlled by the government. Even the companies, like talking about Kuwait Airline. It's been there for a million years. Still the same thing, number of planes, whatever. There is not much improvement. And you can see that a lot of companies that was privatized, it's, the private sector is doing much better job running that company and growing that company and partnering with the international players and doing that. Now, there are other stuff that you can do to, for example, opening up the country, making people to come here. It's easier, bringing the right people instead of marginal workers, like people with expertise. So there are other things, but I think the most important will be to create the private business, first of all, privatization itself, given that opportunity for people to come and invest in these companies. And, like we talk about private equity and all that, what are these companies that we're going to invest in? So you create that by letting the government, we talk about education. There is 750 schools here in Kuwait. You're spending about, I think, 3 billion KDs or something on the education. If you take the number of students here, you're spending like 8,000 KD per student. We're talking from kindergarten to university, different numbers. But with that kind of money, you can do it in a private
That should be enough,
school
right? Yeah.
for half that price, twice better education. The same thing goes for the hospitals, like you're spending all this money, 2.3, 2.4 billion on government hospital, and everybody is going to the private hospital. It's like where this money is going. So it's not the idea of that the private sector is the devil and it's gonna go and kill you. It has to be changed.
You think that perception exists within Kuwaiti society that actually this
absolutely
and that I wouldn't want to work in the private sector as well? Is that still an enduring concern?
It's just common sense. You go to the private sector and you get X amount, or you go to the government, you get X plus 1.
Yeah.
They pay you more. You don't have any any problem.
Any targets and
So just it's a logical solution that you don't want to take the headache, so you just take the easy way out.
Is that resistance still there, do you think, even among the younger parts of society, or do you think those attitudes are changing? I think certainly we see those attitudes changing in other parts of the region. I think probably young Saudis now, for example, are more willing to consider careers that maybe their parents wouldn't. Do you think that's happening here as well?
It will happen if you don't give all these, privileges that the government is giving people. Like it just usually private sector pays here and the government pays here, except for Kuwait. It's like this is the government and this is so. Why should I go to the private sector? You have to give them incentive. Yes, certain private sectors are attractive, and a lot of talented people go there, and they work and they get paid for it. But I think the main competition to the private sector, which is the government, by giving people all these, free stuff. It will make it very difficult for the private sector to compete here.
Why would they ever want to change, right? Kamel, back to you in terms of opportunities for the government to change course, to change direction, to change people's expectations. Clearly this is going to require some difficult decisions, some clear leadership. I wanted to ask you the extent to which that opportunity to set the vision, to really make the required changes, the extent to which that opportunity is hampered by the relationship between the government and parliament. And you know, we hear and read a lot about the tensions that exist between those two bodies. Is that something, again, that you see improving anytime soon?
No, I'll tell you, there is one thing for sure. We know for sure that the government has and had always the majority. The majority is with the government, and they can pass whatever law they want. There is no ambiguity about it. The means and ways, I don't know, but they can do it. However, we also need to educate ourselves. There is still a mistrust. There is no trust between a young graduate or graduate in working in the private sector. He's always afraid that he will be fired at any time. That's a problem. When he goes to the government, he stays forever. But he doesn't stay forever. He stays for 30 years, and they kick him out. So there must be a way to inform the young ones, the young Kuwaitis, the young graduates. There is nothing wrong with the private sector, but we have to give him assurances. What assurances, I don't know. Whether the government will give them more incentive and ask the private sector to hire him for a certain amount of years, 10 years or 15, I don't know. But if you guarantee him that, he will maybe, in some cases, he will be relaxed. But certainly, we have to start with the government and with ourselves, with our societies, to educate. There is nothing to be afraid from the private sector, in particular since now the government is saying openly, I cannot hire 30,000 graduates every year.
Sure, okay. We have 2 minutes left on our clock, and I wanted just to ask you a question about the region as a whole, and whether you think that any of the other countries of the region, perhaps of the GCC, offer good examples for Kuwait to follow, or whether really Kuwait needs to tread its own path. Do you think, and I'll start with you, Kamel, that Kuwait should look to UAE's diversification journey, or it should look to what Saudi is doing at the moment to change its society and change its expectations, or is the challenge for Kuwait so significantly different that it needs to plot its own path?
Oh, that's a good question. First of all, I'm always happy that to see Saudi Arabia doing projects and moving into a better projects and moving forward. This is for me, give an opportunity for Kuwait to maybe to work in Saudi Arabia and to take advantage of what Saudi Arabia is doing. That's for sure. However, we have always been unique. We have always been different. So we will always have our Kuwaiti way. However, that is not to say that I will not look upon them as an example, whether it is Kuwait, whether it is the United Arab Emirates. We are closer to Saudi Arabia. I think I have some opportunities to hire or recruit Kuwaitis. But again, we will have our own formula. Whatever that formula is, we've been living through it. We did the privatization, and we can repeat the same thing again.
Thank you, Kamel. You only have 30 seconds, sir, to answer that very difficult question, but perhaps you could just give your final thoughts.
Yeah, I think that any model will be better than the current situation here. For example, taxes was implemented in the area except for Kuwait. So the only reality in life is death and taxes, and we're cheating on taxes. So if we can do it with death, we will be winners here, I think. So hopefully, yes, any model will do. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on stage and for sharing your wisdom. And thank you all for your attention this morning. Thank you to Farouk Bastaki. Thank you to Kamel Al Harami. I wish you a wonderful conference. Thank you.